have is the approval of the agenda, which was sent out beforehand. Is there a motion to approve that agenda? Is there a motion on the floor? Let me phrase it that way.
A motion that we approve the agenda meeting minutes for today.
Second.
Any discussion about the agenda? We vote? Fantastic. All right. All in favor of approving the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
Fantastic. Great. This part I don't know about, so I'm actually gonna, because Stacy requested that updates be sent to her yesterday or today, I think, there's a deadline that she has to process them. So I'm gonna hold off on the review and approval of September meeting minutes because she has more information than I do, and she is en route. We can open the floor for public comment. I know we do have one not recognized guest, but I don't know if that guest will be making public comment.
He would not want to be disturbed if they posted.
That's totally fair. I understand that. Fantastic. So with that said, then we can go ahead and jump to a council update. Councilmember Johnson, do you have anything to share with us?
Over here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here as always. Council updates. The biggest thing that's happened since last month is the Red Hat vote. The Red Hat vote, I was unfortunate, I had a family emergency, was not able to be there. But that vote was not the final vote. So what we have learned subsequently is that one is coming up on October 15th. It did go to Planning Commission afterwards, through the process of street closure, and this is the comp plan amendment. And if you listen to Planning Commission, they were upset that it felt backwards. And I don't know how to better explain that because I haven't really understood this process. And so if you watch Planning Commission, there's a lot of concern with their inclusion in that decision. So they ultimately denied 5-4. That comes back to us on October 15th for the final decision. There were 2 of us absent. I would foresee that would either be a 6-2 vote, because I'm not sure that anyone who voted for it will vote against it now. And Mary was absent, so I don't know how she'll vote, but it could either be 7-1 or 6-2. I would be in the negative for a lot of the reasons that the Planning Commission listed. And that's for concerns for urban renewal feelings. There is concerns of not enough community engagement with the residents of Heritage Park. The Planning Commission brought up issues of it just being one design, and that we didn't see other designs. It was just, this is the only thing we can do it now. And so I'll be highlighting all of that in that vote on the 15th. But that's pretty much been the biggest decision. That's been the biggest thing on the docket since we came back from break. We have the election, and our council meeting will move to Wednesday the 6th instead of Tuesday the 5th to accommodate for the election. And and another thing, I know that you guys have been dealing with CACs, discussion of CACs, and I have been privileged enough to work with the leadership team, which includes Dr. Lane. And right now they're in the process of getting some feedback from the other CACs as to what they would like to request as an addendum to their motion or to work into the next year. And so I have been in discussion with Tansy. She was our liaison, our staff liaison, but today's her last day. If you guys didn't know, Tansy is leaving. She's going to be the city manager over in Colorado, and I forget the name of the town. Thornton, Colorado. So we're so happy for her, but we're also going to miss her. Today was actually, Nadia and I were just we were just at her farewell, and always a sad day when you're losing an amazing partner like that. But the staff liaison moving forward will be Michelle Millette for CACs. And so I'll be reaching out to you guys on leadership team to schedule our November meeting. So that by that point we'll know who's going to be on council. It'll be after the election, and then we can begin assigning, who is going to be in charge of that conversation moving forward, so that it doesn't get lost, it doesn't get dropped, and we continue that. Other than that, if you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. But those are the 2 biggest things that have been going on in council so far. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it concerns me because of one of the issues about this whole Red Hat and the movement. When you mentioned community engagement, this is a big issue for us.
Huge.
We spend a lot of time on community engagement, But yes, it's still an issue, not getting the community engagement. I'm kind of baffled about what is going on there. So,
I wish I
mean,
had an
what-
answer
what-
for you.
I don't understand it. Why did you even get to that point? We do all this work to help city council and the city to get community engagement.
Mhm,
So something in this process is broken.
100%.
So why doesn't somebody look at it?
Well,
If
we've
something's broken.
I've been signaling that since when this came, the timeline of this, so you understand, is that in February, city staff recognized that they were gonna have to close, not Lenore, but close South Street. We as council didn't hear that until June 11th. And so between February and June, we knew nothing. I didn't know anything was happening with Red Hat at all. And then they came on June 11th, which was a work session. There was 2 meetings, in which we had transportation come for this. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the slip lane discussion. It's a half solution because it's a one-way street, whereas South Street was 2 ways. And that's not approved by DOT. That's got to be a state level approval. We still don't have that. So that's another reason why I'm like, I've been meeting with businesses over this whole time saying, if I don't have an answer to those problems, then how can I vote yes for this? But the timeline purpose, on July 3rd, we went on break. So council was out from July 3rd to August 20th. Some of us were not here, and I was meeting with businesses and residents and all that in between then, but we had no form of communication in order to continue to uplift this. And then August 20th came up, we did uplift community engagement, and what they did is they did on September 9th, they had, over at the Performing Arts Center on Martin Marietta, they had an engagement session, which did include about 60 people. But again, if you don't know the questions to ask, if you're just walking into this, I don't, for me, it wasn't the engagement. It felt like a discussion point, as well as the July 20th, which was closing down South Street. So there was engagement, that they did, but when I stood at that South Street, again, if you didn't know who I was, if you didn't know that I could help answer questions, I was like, there's tents, but you don't know what questions, maybe residents know what questions to ask. So we did uplift that at the August 20th and at the first week of September meeting, right before that engagement meeting. But the timeline, because this is the first domino that will fall before the convention center gets redone, before the hotel gets built. And so things had to line up. So that's the way staff explained it, that if this doesn't, it slows up everything else. And that's what we've been told. So it's not that the questions have not been asked. The questions have been, but the responses we get, the community hasn't responded well to the questions. Yes.
Can we be careful to separate what is engagement and what is information? Because engagement is a feedback loop where we would have input and folks
For
would
sure.
listen to us and we would be part of the conversation.
100%.
What you referred to as engagement was in fact information. The decision, as far as anybody was concerned, and we were told, and part of the reason why I didn't go is there's still decisions made.
Yeah.
There is no point for input.
Yeah.
So that is not engagement.
That's
And I think we need to be really clear about that. And it's not that, I think we should always have engagement. I know sometimes there's timelines where it's, look, we've got to tell you what's going on. But it's a little bit of a bait and switch to go,
100%.
we're engaging the community when you're just telling us stuff.
Yeah.
Not when you're asking us and letting us be engaged and letting us have,
Yeah.
point of information. And to that end, what is the hurry? Does the money disappear?
Oh, that's a great question. So out of the ILA, which you guys, I'm not sure if you're from the interlocal agreement, which we approved last September, that had a few buckets, but the 2 biggest ones were the canes, when we got to keep the canes for 20 years. That was what a lot of the focus was. So we joined council, and then we immediately get hounded with canes. We got to keep the canes. And so they did do I would say relatively small presentation on what was learned, that we were gonna be closing Lenore Street. I remember that just vaguely, because there was a touch point to talk about the canes. And so I felt that this whole process, my attention was driven over here, and then all of a sudden this popped up, and I was like, wait a minute, we barely talked about that. What is this? To your point, I want to address what you said. You're 100% correct. It was not engagement, and we did say that at council as well. It was a touch point that felt like a box checked is what it felt like to the community. And a lot of members, I was afraid for that same reason, that people chose not to come because they knew the decisions made. What is the point of me coming? And that's never how I want engagement to be. And this process was set this way. I don't know by who. I don't know the puppeteers in this, but I feel with you. I understand what you're saying, and I completely agree that we need to do a better job of that.
What you just said scares me, because if there's puppeteers and you're our elected representative.
Right.
I don't know that for a fact. It's what it feels like. I will say that's my personal opinion is what it feels like.
I
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, it's just, it's a little frustrating, and it seems like we are stacking a lot in one area of downtown. I am 100%, and have said this multiple times. I don't know how I feel about closing South Street. I know there's an impact. I've heard from folks that say there's an impact.
Yeah.
I understand everything about that. My biggest concern is we are stacking so much in one space with an expanded convention center,
Mhm.
3 performing arts center, Red Hat. How many people are we trying to get in a 2x2 block? I mean, that small
And
area.
those are conversations that they didn't allow us to have. We had one work session about it. We had touch points after we got back from break, but even our work session, the day before we heard from Raleigh Housing Authority, Ashley Loomers, who's the executive director, and he was staunchly against it. So he came to the work session and Counselor Patton was like, oh, Ashley Loomer sent us an email. Can he speak? And the mayor wouldn't let him speak in that work session. And so we were like, wait, what? How are we? So we had to do that individually. And so it was like this crazy game where you had 8 people who were on break having conversations with this business and then going and talking to RHA and going, wait, here's the Boylan Heights neighbors. And so we're all doing a million different things and had no central way of making sure that we all understood except by.
There's a lot of misinformation. I mean, there's Twitter accounts that are going, they're trying to eliminate Red Hat.
No one was
I've never
ever
heard
trying.
anybody say they would.
No one was trying to eliminate Red Hat.
Yeah.
This was not me or any counselor saying that we don't like Red Hat or that we don't like small businesses.
Right.
But that is the message that the media within that same time frame put forward to give this, I believe, false sense of fearing of the closure of Red Hat, that it never was.
That's it may have come from staff because or someone adjacent, because the Twitter account in particular seemed to have a lot of information that one may not have if one was.
I don't have anyone to like pinpoint to that. I think the media really ran with that, and I don't know how, but they did. I'm gonna come back to you, but Carmen, you had.
I want to add in some things that I think a lot of people may not know. I was invited to a meeting in May about Red Hat, with Carrie Painter, and I thought I'd sent a letter to all the council members. I was invited to a meeting with the folks from the Dix Park Conservancy, Carrie Painter, Patrick Young, somebody from transportation. There were, I think, maybe 4 people from the Dix Park Conservancy and Bill King from downtown Raleigh. Dr. Dillard from Shaw, who's president of the Downtown Raleigh Alliance. Folks from Heritage Park, Sig Hutchinson, and Mac Hall. And the meeting was to share this information that you all then got asked to put on your work session calendar. And that was the first I'd heard that the street was gonna close. And I said in that meeting, because I was the only regular citizen with nothing else attached, I said, how are people supposed to find out that this is going to happen? Other than a detour sign is going to show up and never go away.
Yeah.
And Jay Spain was there from Boylan Heights. I was very frustrated during that meeting because I got the impression that was the community engagement right there. And I said to them, this is not, I said, and beyond that, I said, this is continuing to build on the backs of a Black community that was destroyed in the 60s and 70s, and you're just pushing it further. And of course, they had said that, well, we could put a mural up. Who gives a shit? I'm sorry, Al. it ignored everything that there was about community engagement.
Yep.
It ignored everything that there had been that nobody had looked into in terms of environmental issues.
Right.
Because we've got the branch, we've got all those things going on. And I said, is anybody in the public gonna find this out if I don't put it out on my Facebook page? Or send emails out? And so I was shocked that within 3 weeks, there was this emergency meeting with the council, and the council knew nothing.
You know,
Because obviously somebody knew something, because departments were there presenting the exact same plan, the exact same slides that they presented to the council.
and I want to just quickly, I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to address what you're saying. We get lots of emails but I do vaguely remember, and then Jay Spain also sent one. Remember, at that time, we knew nothing. I didn't even know what you were talking about. So in there, I'm like, oh, okay. And we didn't get that presentation till June 11th. At that point, we started going, all right, and that triggered, we were doing walkthroughs of the property, and they're showing us, oh, this is what it could be. And I think it's beautiful. That's a great idea, but that should be like option A. And then where is option B? And where is the differences that we were not presented with? We were given a plan
They
that
showed
said,
us
this is,
options that day.
they did not to us.
They did not, but they said that this was the best option.
Mhm,
But I know that
mhm.
you can create any kind of option to do anything.
We can do hard
You want to
things.
spend the money. The other thing that I wanted to share is I noticed we have an Office of Community Engagement, but staff departments don't have to use it. And that is frustrating when I'm sitting in a meeting, a city council meeting, and I hear one of the counselors say, oh, if you'll send me that, have you considered, reaching out to the churches in an area to tell them that this is going on? And the staff person says, oh, I didn't think about that.
Mhm,
And so I reached out to Taisha and I said, how does this work?
mhm.
And she says that there's place on, I guess, in the city of Raleigh thing that they can come and ask if they want help. And you all figure out varying levels of assistance based on what they want. But obviously, there are people who don't want to go through it because they think they know what community engagement is. So other than putting more staffing into the Office of Community Engagement, because I know if everybody went within, they could handle everything.
Yeah.
How do you address the fact that city employees who have no concept of what engagement is, you don't go to a Black community to do something, you don't think about a church. You
Right,
don't think about two churches that are on either side of the
Yeah.
thing that you're working on to go to them. And it was clear that it just never crossed his mind to do that. So, I mean, does there need to be some training on community engagement for staff,
mhm.
different departments?
So to answer, something that just happened in our last council and in consent that I pulled to make sure that people saw is that we are moving 6 positions from housing and neighborhoods to community engagement in an effort to make community engagement a department instead of an office. So to your point, we've got a few.
So my announcement.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm
Okay.
stealing her thunder.
It's 14 positions, so we're gonna be a staff of like 20 plus.
Right, so this is in an effort, there is work. Now, they were in office before. So what I don't want us to think is, yeah, you're 100% correct that you have offices that weren't using it. There were like 6 of them. So I don't ever want that to be a judgment on the community engagement office. It is, we are growing and these are part of our growing pains. But I'm very happy that the city has recognized that and added, I said 6, it's 14. I'm sorry, I gave the wrong number. It'll be 14 positions. What I mentioned in council when I pulled that is none of those are meant to replicate what we had with CACs before. And so all of that is because of all this work that we're talking about that they have to do. So I wanted to put that and be level set that we are still waiting to hear from CACs as to what the requests are before we begin to budget for that. So this transition is not in an effort to do solely CAC work. It's in an effort to address the concerns that you bring up. It's to say, how do we grow so this department can flourish and can broaden and strengthen all the conversations within the departments. I don't know that we're 100% there, that we have an answer to every one of your questions, but I am excited that is a really positive move that we made, and that was just in our last council. So you're not going to see the results of that tomorrow, but we are making those adjustments because we've heard from the community very loud and clear, especially through this Red Hat discussion, that there was not any level of engagement that was meaningful to the community.
It was fake, and I really do think it was done because I asked the question that I asked
Well,
in
thank
May
you.
at that meeting. And I, at the event that was at Mimandi, the transportation plan they were talking about didn't have anything to do with Red Hat. Then I ended up going in circles trying to find out the information that I wanted.
Right.
And it was just very frustrating. And I feel like it was a dog and pony show that, as I said to everybody, it didn't have anything to do with the Office of Community Engagement. They were there staffing it, but none of that was anything that they were responsible for and should not have been. Because I know there was some tension there because people tried to say things about the Office of Community Engagement during that process.
And it was not.
And it's unfair that office would catch any hell behind any of the Red Hat stuff because none of that was on.
No, because by asking in July for the touch point in June, we asked for July to do that on July 20th. And then Councillor Harrison asked for the touch point in September, and the Community Engagement Department stepped up and said, okay, let's do it. And they did exactly what they knew to do. I mean, they've been part of this conversation either. So I think I don't have anybody to blame specifically other than like the man, you know, and that I don't know what to do, but these are those moments that boards, this is where I need your voices. I need your voices to be able, just like the Planning Commission did, and they handed us a new one on that one. I appreciate that. This is your moment to say those same things to us. Say that, and not just to me, you know, I'll definitely report out on Tuesday about it, but I need you guys raising those concerns. Otherwise they just get swept under the rug. Go ahead.
I just want to take a moment to speak out against this philosophy of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, the process was done incorrectly. However, the city, the businesses downtown, the people need Red Hat. History matters. Streets don't matter. History was washed away to build a street. We can get rid of this street for a permanent music venue. Red Hat was always built to be temporary. So this proposal was just, how are we going to keep Red Hat? This is the one way that we're going to keep Red Hat. I don't understand why anybody would not want to keep Red Hat just because one person, in my opinion, did things wrong.
Well, I'll push back on that. It wasn't one person. There's multiple levels. I mean, I'm sitting in the seat, so I'm going to tell you that it wasn't just one person. This is on multiple levels, going back all the way from our ILA decision. And it's not to say that one should have won out or other. The point of community engagement and the point of that is to have this discussion openly, so then we can come to and more than that, we will still come to that same decision. The problem is the conversation didn't happen. And so for me, that's the issue. At the end of the day, the 6 votes passed. The street's going to close. There's nothing we can do in terms of the votes that are going to change that. So now how I want to make sure, as I've been talking, because I've been working really hard with businesses and I've been meeting with them nonstop. I've connected them with RHA so that RHA and the business community could see that it's not that we don't want Red Hat. There is nothing in my being that says I don't want Red Hat. I want the conversation so that we can say out here are the issues, and let's make sure we have solutions for those issues before we make a big decision like that. So I'm not at all, it wasn't one thing that happened. It was a multitude of things over a long period of time. And it started with, in my opinion, the decision in February to not include council. Had we found out and had I learned in February, I would have started that community engagement then. but I didn't find out till 2 meetings before we went on break.
So if the vote goes to the negative, what will your next steps be to save Red Hat for the city?
Well, first of all, it's not, like, the votes already had, the vote for the 6, the unanimous vote that happened to pass it, none of those, and I've already spoken to them, are going to change their vote. So there's no fear of it not passing. There is one, and I can only speak for myself, and that's my vote, and every vote is a value set from council. So if you have 8 votes, and this is what I said to businesses, I said, I think you have the votes to pass it, but I'm gonna vote no to make sure that those people who are not in the room are reflected and they're part of this discussion. That doesn't mean they have to win. That means I want them part of it. And when I got responses, not from many, but from 2 businesses that said, if it's not a unanimous vote, then you hate small businesses. And I said, that is not fair, because community engagement is not about me winning that vote. It's not about us canceling and saying goodbye Red Hat. It's not a black or white like that. It's about saying, hey, this is happening. The majority of council wants to close South Street, and yet we still have this issue. I still have a street that's not been approved by DOT. What are we as a community going to do about that? And that's the purpose of that vote. It's not to say, oh, I won, or we have 8 people who just want Red Hat, and suddenly that's just a win for Red Hat, but could be a potential huge loss to Heritage Park community, to Boylan Heights, who also have complaints against it. So whenever we have these decisions, we can't look at it as a binary yes, no. We have to encompass all of the nuances of that decision, and that was not done. And so that's my frustration. There's no way that it's not going to pass. I only know of me for 100% that will be a no in order to uplift that. So to fear that it's not going to pass, I think is not fair either, because there's no threat to Red Hat at this moment. So how are we, now that we know there's no threat, how are we going to make sure that we all rally behind and make sure that the community gets what they need? That's where I want to have that conversation now, because.
But even if the council voted no, the Red Hat's still on the ground.
Mhm.
And the money still exists. I mean, the thing that, taking 3 months to have a discussion, does this belong in this space here? It definitely belongs downtown. It needs to go nowhere outside of downtown. Does it belong on top of all the other venues, especially as we increase the size of the convention center? Does it belong, does the street need to be, there's a lot of questions that could be asked that 3 months' time would give ample time for discussion and change the outcome 0.
Right, and the questions that, like, why could we not go up with the convention center? We want to go up everywhere else. Everywhere else, we're getting 20, 30 students. And I'm not saying that's the answer, but the theoretical conversation that we could have had to say, go up so that Red Hat didn't have to move, we didn't have to close South Street, and we still got a bigger convention center. Why not do that? I didn't get any answers to that. I'm not saying that's the right one. I'm not saying that I am right, but there was no conversation.
That on top of.
Right.
Which actually, as far as artwork and, architectural artwork goes, was a really cool picture to see. Knowing that, like most architectural artwork, it looks nothing like that. But still a cool concept. And
So to get back
at the
to
end of the
your.
day, I'm still gonna go to concerts,
Right, and I love Red Hat too, but back to your question from earlier, and I'm sorry I skipped over it, does the money exist? Yes, but in that ILA, because this is a countywide thing, I don't know what the rules are to that if you don't spend it, does it now go into a bigger pot and now the other parts of the county can use it? I don't know the answer to
My
that.
understanding on that is once it's dedicated to that.
Right.
And that's part of what we're gonna see, I think, even with the Canes, because that plan is unbelievably ambitious.
Yeah.
And it's gonna take a long time. It's not gonna get done in a fiscal year or 3 fiscal years. That's a decade-long plan at best.
Right.
So I don't, as far as I'm aware, I don't think there's any expiration date on their local funds once they're dedicated. And
Yeah.
that's why I was like.
And you may be right, but my point is that I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I don't know what would happen to the funding. It was for their timeline purposes, meaning they had contract signed. We had it with Lowe's, because the hotel was going up there, and those timelines would be pushed back and some people may back out. So, again, the conversation wasn't there. And so for me to be able to say to you, no, this is why we had to do it, and the fact that I can't do that, that's unacceptable. Not Red Hat. I promise you, no one is against Red Hat, but it goes beyond just this one venue.
I just throw it, because this is where I'm taking my brain, is I'm asking myself, how was it done? Did it look like how it's always been done? If it does, our mission says radical inclusion. we have a sort of ethical obligation to look at disrupting it. In the way for what, we were just having a conversation about community engagement, and there's a world of people thinking that community engagement is about finding the outcome, right? Like it's about bringing community together to get to a certain point that we move forward. That is like accurate. It's just that the outcome is really motivated by consensus, right? And consensus doesn't mean that everybody agrees.
Right.
It just means that everybody's okay with the decision that we've arrived at. And that's where I think a lot of people get nervous, because you can't force or control any of those things. Because for some people, it is their lives, it is their lineage, it is their family tradition, it is their legacy. And we may not think a certain thing is that important in referencing, a particular place, but that doesn't mean that the space doesn't carry meaning for other people. That's different.
And that's
Can I make
all.
a comment?
Oh, please.
Sorry. You guys are having such great conversation. I love this. I love this conversation. I feel like it really adds to like what we do as an office, as a board, as a department later on. But I do want to say, like, I agree, that is definitely how we perceive community engagement. And I will say not everyone that works for the city currently, right, has that framework or perspective on community engagement, right? They haven't been exposed to what like meaningful relationships and conversations and building trust with the community really looks like. And so, as an office, going to be a department, there are a lot of plans and things that we want to put into work, like building capacity, having trainings on, we have this thing called success factors where people can go in and learn about different topics, right? Like DEI or budgeting or whatever sort of things that they need to do for their everyday work. And community engagement is going to be one of those topics that we're going to build to add to that as a resource for people to just kind of have like a foundational understanding of how not just the Office of Community Engagement, but I feel like residents would like to be engaged, right, in the projects that the city works on. So just know that that's in the works. That's part of our like business plan as well as our goals. Like we have specific staff members who are working on building out content and things like that. And that's always somewhere where you guys can come in, right, and like provide feedback or be part of those projects with our office. Like I'm an open book, like whatever suggestions, things that you think we should do to make your experience better here as a resident, but also like, I like you all. So like, I love working with you guys. And thanks Carmen for having my back at the red hat things. But yeah, I just wanted to give that update, like know that like our office is what, like three and a half years old. I'm only 1 year into this as a staff member, so there are a lot of things that we have to build out. And obviously, it's going to take time. It should have been done yesterday, but that's not the reality of things. So just want to mention that.
And it's how do we use these moments? Because right now, whatever the decision is done, it's going to be yes, it's going to move forward. That's what it is. How do we use this to make it better for the next time? And instead of living in this moment, how do we make it better? Because Planning Commission, which is an advisory board to us, who felt that they were not heard by us, let us know. Is this a moment that you think should have come to you because of engagement? Should this have been sent to the Community Engagement Board? Those are the things that I want to work with you guys on so that we can make the process in the future better and not feel as isolated as this one does. There's nothing we can do at this moment about that vote. It's going to happen. And that it is what it is, democracy. You've got 6 counselors who want it, and that's what it is. We have to be able to move forward. But with notes of how to do it better in the future is what I look to the advisory boards for. That's what I would want your advice on. Is cool. Here are the things you didn't like. How do we fix those for the next time? And I'd love to hear your input on that. And it doesn't need to be right now. And I just threw a bomb on you, and I'm like, oh, we just had this deep conversation. I don't want to take up the rest of your meeting. But I really do appreciate all of your inputs and making sure that your voice is part of that.
To situate this in the work plan, this is issue number 3 from the previous work plan. So as we're working on the second work plan, like that call exists, it's sanctioned by city council. So we do have that as a potential avenue to explore in terms of having a response. I do also want to uplift Carmen's participation in this process and recognizing the consent that we've all built around not representing the board in various situations. Carmen attended as a person and focused on community engagement without roping in her presence as a board member. Engaged in a way that balances all of the interests that we carry.
I don't think I was nasty either, so y'all take it. Say it, y'all.
So thank you so much. I will stop talking now. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Okay. Hi. Apologies for I guess it's a curse now. Every second Wednesday, I will be stuck somewhere on the interstate where there's a wreck or two. But thank you, Jeff, for getting started and making sure we're on time. There is a lot more to discuss today, so I'm glad we're all in talking mood. I'm gonna skip back just a little bit. I know the agenda was approved, but not the minutes from September. There were no minutes, adjustments to the minutes that were sent to me. I'll call for any now. We have them. Before a motion to approve them. And a second. Yeah, Anthony. All of those in favor, please audibly say aye. And any opposition? Perfect. So we'll move to committee updates. Yeah, do you want to start? Do you want to?
Sure. In the packet, the meeting agenda packet, if you will turn to the third page. Yes, last page. This is the work that we've been doing on the Public Project Community Support Fund in installing the action governance team. This is a little bit clearer of a graphic just because of the way that it's broken down. And so the first page is the action team application process, which should be like in the world of how this happens at times and at the same time as like the announcement and the call for the letters of interest. It should potentially be happening at that point in time, which is why you see the funding priorities on the top line there. Moving in, you'll see that that mirrors on the second page, that mirrors the beginning of the overall project application process. The project application process is not something that TOTA has asked for us to be involved. So there's some stuff that's like missing in terms of minor details. So for those of you that are very focused on minutia and those types of things, that wasn't within our purview. There's just this world of needing to understand how the governance action team intersects within that process. So for example, if you're looking at that last page, there has to be in developing guidelines, criterion and metrics after the funding priorities are done, that actually needs to exist within the action team governance. So that's the justification for the intertwining of the two processes, but we've really just been asked to assemble the team. So the infographic describes, if we look at the action team process, so that third page again. The presentation and what TOTA has decided is that there are essentially ex officio members that comprise essentially a core of the action team. These standing members include a team leader, which is variable. There's no specific qualification at this point. There's an opportunity for feedback from the board about whether or not that wants to be something more specific. In the sense of the action team leader, perhaps is maybe that person needs to be X, Y, or Z. Like that's a curiosity that equity has to offer to the whole board in consideration for feedback. Then within that, there's someone from TOTA executive or two folks from TOTA executive leadership. So that would pull from a pool of about like 6 people, I think it is, maybe it's more. Taisha is one of those people. Michael Moore, the city manager, I think is one. Dan Bagley from Neighborhoods is another one. So I'm just throwing names out at you to help understand that we have a fixed population that we're pulling from in there. So there's less to worry about in terms of criteria and figuring X, Y, and Z about because it's going to be some of these people. It might just be a random poll of who's interested in working this cycle or what have you. And then the final composition includes 2 members from this board. And so that's, again, another point of consideration for whether or not we want to offer that goes on a rotational cycle. And, Equity is asking you all what your feedback is in terms of how that happens. It's not necessarily something to be specifically pushed to policy, but that's what we're sort of bringing at this point. It's like there are spaces where there are gaps that we as a board have an opportunity to fill in. But essentially that core has to be selected. That's something that needs to kind of be a collaboration between us and TOTA. So it's a piece that happens in flight, right? So we're building the plane as we're flying it, or building the plane as it's rolling off the hill. I'm not really sure how you see that analogy, but it's happening as things are going on. Hopefully, as the funding priorities are established and the LOIs or the call for proposals is going out. Some of the things that we considered in terms of those, in terms of the criteria is like, what is the scope of work? If it has to do with the arts, that might mean maybe somebody like me would be on it. If it has to focus, if the funding priority is we want to hit small businesses, it might be Clint, our small business representative, plus X, Y, and Z. So the scope of work becomes a factor in terms of the decision making. The geography, so the reality being that the city is really curious about how people locally are impacted and affected. So maybe it's that it's happening in your area, in your neighborhood. Could be that you're in the district and aligned with it in that way. Lots of different spaces. So again, there's a world of what questions you have for us to work to answer in pushing this forward. And then the last one is intersections of identity, right? Whether it be about the age and experience that you have within that neighborhood, recognizing the potential history, legacy, or the sort of vision that you bring into the space in terms of what should be, what and how things should be handled. Because this funding is about mitigating adverse effects in terms of transportation and affordable housing development, right? So hopefully uplifting positive outcomes and potentials while minimizing negative and adverse effects. Within that core group, I think it ends up being 5 people. They essentially begin to develop, refine, revisit. So trying to make this evergreen, right? This first time it's going to be developing how they choose the members. So the idea is that they're going to do 1 cycle per year. So we define it, we develop it this year. Next year it's refined or revised, that sort of thing. That's why it's interchangeable in there. We have an application shell from the Office of Community Engagement that we'll start to utilize as part of the process. And that's where you all come in terms of outreach and activation and selection process. Because what we have done over the past few months is sort of talk about a myriad of things. And so when I was reviewing our minutes, we started talking about how we wanted to reach people in terms of whether or not how it might look. So some of the conversation that we had was about moving through city communications, which feels like that's one avenue. The other avenue was trying to do and manage direct outreach. So the idea of finding direct mail, those types of things are on the table. We do have potentially access to budget funds that are not our funds, so not board funds, but that are either OCE or TOTA funds to devote to the outreach that's necessary. Recognizing that ultimately the remaining people that fill out this board, there's like 4 more slots. So for those of us that are in marketing and in that kind of world of collective engagement, that at the end of the day, you only need to reach like 2,000 people to get to that level. And we know, at least in terms of OCE's list, just generally speaking, we got 800 responses. So we know that their list is much larger than that. So we're already mathematically starting in a place that benefits. So I think that the questions that we have is sort of like, where are the gaps that we think those types of strategies are missing, right? So like, for example, and I think I talked about it a couple of months ago, Lasharo brought up the idea of sending notifications and utility bills, which seems really great. And I totally got excited about it until I thought about the fact that I live like right now in the apartment that I'm in, I don't pay a water bill. So it can't be through the water bill.
And you don't, if you sign up for them on Yeah, one, you never say one.
So it's like that, there are these great ideas, that happen, and we now are at the point where we can sort of enlarge the strategies. And we don't have to do this here. I think this is something that can be just a matter of, if you think of things, you can just send me an email, send it to me, and then I'll incorporate it in here. But essentially, we're at the point of asking the question of the full board, how it is that we would like to ensure that our values of radical inclusion are met in the outreach and the activation to bring people into the pool. So the idea is that we have a huge wide funnel and we narrow it down, right? In terms of, we can take 7,000 applications. I mean, the reality is we're not going to use 7,000 people, but at the end of the day, that if we have that problem, that's great. Because then it gives us an opportunity, because we talked with Dale, like acknowledging people. And if they're making this initial outreach, then it creates a larger question of what do we do to keep them engaged? What do we do to take them into the next step? So this particular phase of the project can actually open up more communities for us to be in relationship with, for us to explore with, depending on the strategies that we utilize. So in addition to that, we know we're going to have collaborations with city departments and those types of things. So unfortunately for city folks, and this is something that I think harkens back to this piece here. As I was walking in, the reality is community engagement complicates everything that you do because it is anti-capitalist and it is disruptive by nature, right? If we're all business professionals and we're efficient, we're doing the things we need to do, we don't necessarily take into consideration all of the data points in the decision-making process. But community engagement is designed to surface all of those data points. And so the reality for me is that we are inherently problematic in every space that we walk into, especially if there's money and revenue attached to it. When we are adjacent to profit-making ventures, we are a problem that people see. In this regard, this is an opportunity for us to, again, continue to demonstrate where we stand in relationship to how communities can be brought together, how we can harness community voice and activate those individuals in the hopes of them continuing their civic participation beyond this specific charge. So underneath this, we're also in talks with, I think I asked the question when Michael was here, there's potential that folks that come onto the action team who will end up reviewing these proposals do actually get paid for their time doing that. It is to ensure at least some level of accountability and sort of commitment to the process. When I have reviewed for one of the sort of challenges is that I haven't seen an actual application packet because I don't have one. So that's another part of the request that we're going to be putting in, is that there has to be a standardized process that we can look at to sort of figure some things out, because there's a huge difference between evaluating a 2-page proposal that gives you a 2-page budget versus a 40-page proposal that gives you a 10-page budget, right? And if people don't feel acknowledged in the work that they're doing, particularly around making a decision like that, having worked with a grant-making organization in the past, they will do this and they'll show up in the meeting and they'll wait to see who their friend is, who they've grown attached to, and watch how they vote and then follow them. Or if there are other things like some organizations do have staff do a summary sheet of like, here are the proposals, top line, here's the people that are leading, here's the money they're asking for, 3 sentences about the thing, and then panelists will just make a decision based on that as opposed to looking at the whole application. So there are also pieces that sort of have to be massaged out within that part of the process, which really we are proposing lives with that core of 5 people identified for that particular cycle. So there's an initial phase of establishing the core 5 that become sort of decision makers in articulating the funding priorities that are presented by TOTA, that are then translating that into a rubric to help applicants be successful, right? Which is supporting equitable access to funds and resources. In my experience, I've been in situations where staff members, I'm not volunteering you all until you get 14 people. You get a staff above 20, then we can talk about it. But in some versions of reality, there's actually like interchange between the staff and the applicants to make sure that you're presenting the best application that you and can put forward. I love that because what it does is minimizes the anger and frustration that people feel when they don't get it. because they feel like, oh, I put forward my best foot. You helped me. You were an advocate in that process with me. And so when you tell me why I didn't get it, because the pool was ultra competitive, because there's only X amount of dollars, or because there are other projects that were so powerful in how they articulated, you were missing this. It helps people grow in terms of their own work that they're doing. And that feels particularly important with this project because it's actually a multi-organizational, multi-entity application process. So like, it's like one nonprofit partnering with a community group, partnering with the neighborhood association, leading this application here. And in those types of arrangements, in order to make them equitable, being able to provide some of that feedback is helpful. So that's in a nutshell. I don't know if it's a real nutshell. In a nutshell, that's sort of what we're talking about. And so I don't know, do we want to open the floor to questions or do we want to continue to push through? Because I feel like the other business is a big deal, right?
If you don't, maybe you have something that needs some specific feedback.
I have one question, but more, keep it simple so that we're talking to each other. But this is the first action team that we developed that'll take action. Two things I want to be sure of. When we bring the citizen community in to give input at a very important point. So here we have them at the end, coming in on the application part. Is that right? When the community representatives are selected to be part of that and not up here when the scope is developed?
I think that that's flexible. Like it's not there has to be some work started because the priorities have to come and land somewhere and somebody's got to be managing the assemblage of the team. That being said, things can be differently paced. And I think also there's potentially a world of asking what TOTA's doing to ensure that there's community engagement around the whole of it in the sense of what is people's awareness of this effort in terms of assigning these public funds. So I think there's two layers to what you're asking. One is the layer of general community engagement, getting the information out to people and asking them about the projects to develop the funding priorities, which was not the charge from TOTA. That was not the ask from them. The ask was in establishing the governance where we get an opportunity to ensure it reaches as many community members as possible is in the outreach and the invitation to apply. And then the criteria that could potentially be set. So those are the two places where I'm asking for specific feedback from the board as a general whole is how do we reach all of the people that we think need to be involved in this process? And then how do we potentially narrow it down to get to the numbers where it's an effective representation of community voice?
I think those are gonna be hard to answer, especially in a meeting like this, but one of the things the help desk piece that you mentioned, where someone can help, I think that's incredibly important. I understand there are limitations with staff and time and space and everything else. I think in lieu of that, having feedback to the applicants, whether it's a set score or just a paragraph going, you were not selected because one of the things I want to do, I mean, in my head, I see this with it being a lot of first-time applicants and folks that haven't done this before, and they probably are not going to meet the criteria. I don't want to be discouraging. I really would like to see us have a full feedback loop that goes, this is what happened. This is how to improve, especially if we don't have the bandwidth to do the help desk, having something that really is encouragement to continue, because everything doesn't require money. Some of these groups may go, my idea was good and they liked it, they just didn't have the money. I'm going to push forward anyway, and I'd love to see us, help with that as well.
There is potential, I think, in terms of identity. And the reason why I call this the core is because it's a fixed pool of people. We're already on the list of rosters and we're saying yes to being of service, right? So like there's a world of that core of people being able to decide how they want to build out the process. Because in my experience, actually having like workshops and engagements prior to the RFP being due is actually as helpful, because then you're already in the eligibility conversation with people, right? I have this harebrained idea, here's what I'm thinking, and and part of the, one person from this team is responding to it and saying, unfortunately, we need this here. Or that sounds really great because you're hitting these three things that are in the criteria. That's wonderful.
Anytime I've seen one of those done, one of the beautiful things that happens is people will find other people. And it's, as you pointed out as well, it's not always one entity that meets and checks all the marks. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 or 2. And having something like that, I think would be incredibly valuable to help, help these folks find each other, because everybody operates in their own silo, especially in the nonprofit world, so they have to get out of it.
So there's a world of community engagement that gets people to that experience.
Yeah, it's interesting on this one because my mind is, I use the action team a little different on a different project that I had on developing a community garden. My problem, my issues with staff sometimes is when I confront them about their engagement and input, at what level do you bring the community in? Because some of the stuff that they brought you in, then if you had brought me in earlier, we could have maybe addressed some of this. So, and it was always a technical thing to say, well, we got certain rules and regulations we got to do, so you can't come in there. So then by the time you come out with all of that, you may tell me what you're going to give me, but I could have helped with some of that. So this is the thing I'm being very careful of. And the second thing is with one that you mentioned is upfront, to get as many people to apply that don't fail and worry about picking them up. Because if the even playing field for everybody to reach the right people, diversity of people, then that's what we work for. Not to say that we fall into the same trap with contracts, missing minorities and other underrepresented groups, so I just want to be sure that as uniqueness as we want to be, that we don't fall into some of what you always done. You always get what you always got. So I always want to listen for that. And if we're doing that, I think it's something that we want to be careful of.
I do want to make sure everybody is clear that we're not decision makers in the application process.
Right.
So the goal of, at the end, I understand, but the goal of the equity committee was trying to be framed now is the process to select the people who will be part of that process. So how do we get the people who have those things in mind best on this team? And then that team, along with TOTA, goes through, and TOTA really has the final decision. The board will be able to have a chance to review the applications that come through, provide feedback. That action team will do the same. The governance action team will do the same and help it review them, but the final say goes to TOTA. I do think there's opportunity to say, we don't want to have the same mistakes made.
Yeah.
We don't want to just engage people and then not tell them anything about what their process looked like. I think there's space for us to have more recommendations than we thought maybe on the front end. But in this specific process, this is the linchpin. So getting this governance action team formed is the first step. Nobody's moving until we do that.
I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. The funding priorities is the first step, and that's where I think we might want to, as a board, push back a little bit in terms of TOTA. How are you developing these funding priorities? Where is, now, again, I'm gonna see that Taisha is on that body. So I think there's a world of, maybe there's just a simple question to Taisha about what sort of framing the funding priorities, like how are they arriving? Because the funding priorities bound the bucket, right? Like at the end of the day, if somebody comes to the bucket and they're trying to make it different, it's already too late. So that's one of the things that I'm hearing there, is that maybe there's a world of us at least advising that there be some consideration around the formation of those funding priorities and how they come together to create the call.
Could the equity committee possibly email this ask to us?
Yes. Email that. Again, it's primarily for outreach, activation, and then selection criteria. So things that we should be thinking about. The hardest part for me personally, and I think maybe across the committee, we struggle with it. And it's like the funding priorities are X, Y, and Z. It's hard to talk about what the criteria needs to be. There's also a need for a subject matter expert. And that has to do, I'm assuming, like the logic of that is about feasibility, right? The subject matter expert comes in to say like, yes, this is a doable project because X, Y, and Z factor is, but that subject matter expert may be a construction project manager because all of the funding priorities were about building things, or all of the proposals were about building things. So there's a lot of different places where there's sort of air in the process because we're not in the middle of it. We're not actually doing it right now. Or maybe perhaps I'm saying we didn't have enough access to information, specific information, to actually then build around what we know. They just know that they are arriving at their funding priorities and they're waiting to see what this is. So it's like, once we get the feedback from y'all, we can start to shop it up to them and then get deeper into the conversation. And as Stacy mentioned, essentially this governance action team is designed to do the heavy lifting, right? So in reality, for the 2 members that end up being on an application cycle, we should be able to turn to them as experts on the applications in terms of knowing who's in there, knowing many of the projects, not necessarily, when I say knowing who's in there, not having a personal relationship in there, but knowing that, oh, there are these organizations are in there, that kind of a thing. Once the review process and the paneling has occurred, they're supposed to bring the short list of here are the people that we would like to recommend for funding back to us as a full board before we move it forward to TOGA. So there's a world of potentially, if you're not on the action team, because even as I said that, the reality is that I know where we're gonna go, which is why you're presenting me a short list of 10 applications, but what was the full pool and what were the other applications looking like? So I think there's a world that the board would have the ability to at least look at the applications to get a feel for it, to understand what's happening. Or it's possible that we could request, within this structure, that we get summary sheets that are similar. There's lots of different tools. So again, as you're thinking through this and referring to this visual and the flow of information going forward, poke holes in it. It was just for 5 and counting Dale, 6 of us on this.
I'm just gonna add that you guys are more than welcome to join our meeting, more minds, but definitely be helpful.
So yeah, any types of space that you see is probably space that we know about, and just, some of it, like, we have no idea what the funding priorities are. They kept pointing us back to that presentation that we saw with all of the things on there. It's like, okay, that's great, but are you spending the money in exactly the same place? Well, we're working on that. So it's a little bit slippery in terms of what information we've got. So if you feel like we're being evasive, it might just be because we don't know. But yes, we can certainly we'll send the request with a digital file with these 2 things on there so that you can provide feedback on who should be in the funnel and how we get the right people in the room.
Anything else? That's it. Oh, and we have our meeting on Zoom, so.
Except for once a quarter.
Except for once a quarter, we're in person, so. Yeah, just pull us up.
I can't hear anything that's going on in there.
I was just reminding that we were on Teams.
Then we were on
Zoom.
not Zoom.
Anything else from equity? Beautiful. Very quickly, 2 updates. I will give both the policy and outreach committee updates. One, the policy committee did not meet again this month. It's about a lot of business. Not a lot going on in the policy world. That may change judging by some of the things we talked about today. Hopefully they do. But the one update was about a public comment that we had at the September meeting at Carolina Pines. And it was toward the end of the meeting, so if you read the minutes, it was a little bit out of order. But the comment was a concern over the equipment at Carolina Pines, as well as the upkeep of just the area, so trees not being cut back, pest problem. As we created last year, the public comment tracker was updated with that information. So we got her information, her email, She also contacted the center director staff, and that got filtered up as well, about the issue, but we're able to update the tracker. I reached out to her to say, one, thank you for leaving your comment. We're discussing it, which is what the process that we established. And then bug these two people to ask them what the best way to get information on both the upkeep of the actual area and the equipment would be. That led us to Parks Department to, part of their plan for the next 2 or 3 years is helping redesign and update all of that equipment. So it's not something that's done immediately, but at least we know Carolina Pines is on their radar and that's part of their plan overall. And then that led to something else, I forget the department name, to talk about, was it like forestry or something?
I think it was forestry. It's about the getting
The tree, right. So it took, and somewhere in that conversation, Karen Ray, who works in customer experience, who came to talk to us last month and has been here before, entered into it. So all of those pieces, us hearing information and concerns, being able to engage staff helping lead us to the right department, that department responding, and then us being able to tell the person who left the comment, has all worked in the system that we designed it, maybe for the first time ever. Now, did she respond? No, but the hope is either way, that information, the point is, I think on one end of it is that we created a system that works, and we created a system that matters, because she was able to come there, people heard what she said, that went places to get responses. And even though it's not immediate, those needs and concerns will be met. So I communicated those things to the policy committee, that the email was sent out. It's not something that we had to meet about, so I would hate to have a 9-minute meeting to tell you what I just told you in like 60 seconds. But that's the update on policy where we are now. There wasn't any other old business for us. I don't think that's carried over. So we did not meet. Yes.
One question, would that, any of that information about the concern go to the park board? So that they know that there was some concern?
I didn't send it.
It could, but
It could.
we didn't.
I mean, as part of that process of trying to identify who needs to know, is the park board one that just gets a copy of that concern? You know, the other thing I would have added, when I went out and talked to her and came back, is that there's an active CAC in that area. That and I tried to refer to that, she never contacted me back. But the chair of the active CAC is a member of the park. And I'm gonna ask you if you even heard about this. You see what I'm saying? So this is the community thing, that when you look at that whole cycle, to look at who needs to at least be aware that there was a concern. And so that's why I asked those two about the board and about if there's an active CAC as a community group that deals with that, and they probably meet right there at that, at that thing. So I'm just for, yeah, but you never heard about this? Other than in the meeting?
I hadn't heard her particular complaint, but there were a lot of complaints about Carolina Pines. I mean, we got one of the outfits that was fresh coat paint, and they didn't put AC in the gym, and there's a whole big, I mean, that area has its own world of complaints, but it was nice that somebody actually found us and came and showed up, and I love the follow-up you on that. I think that's awesome. I mean, to me, that shows process works.
I think we have the process down now, just getting more people engaged in that process.
Well,
And
I think
improve that.
sometimes, I mean, not hearing back is a positive.
Right.
I mean, and I say that in the sense that this person felt heard and they stepped back. That's great. I mean, we didn't necessarily, we would have liked to see a bigger, broader solution, but maybe the solution sometimes is just we receive the message.
I think that's fine. I would love to have more people that come in and say, hey, I have this thing that I'm concerned about, enough to come and tell us.
Yeah.
And then we'd be able to use that process more, because it seems to be one that can be done hopefully fairly easily. Yeah.
So that's one of the interesting things in life. I know this is like, it brings the previous motion, it brings the motion made, but like one of the efforts that we're trying to make is outreach to people that are affected by projects in the areas. Like that's the map that we're traveling on right now. And so at this point, as things stand, because we can't transition over without council approval into that land, there are two folks on the equity policy committee that are gonna be collaborating with Dale to reach out to people that are in the area where our next meeting is in November, in the hopes of inspiring public comment that activates, that provides information to go into the public comment process.
Any questions for the policy? Great. Outreach, as I understand, was not able to meet this last month either.
I wasn't contacted.
Outreach did not meet at all this month. I'll talk about this a little bit more probably as we get into work plan, just to save some time and skipping over conversation. As of today, Tom is still on the board, but will not serve as the chair of the outreach committee, which I think was Tom, Rhonda, Anthony. I'm not missing anybody else on that committee. Okay. So there is a lot that's coming kind of down the pipeline from the board in general. Some things that will be specific to ESS, some that will be specific to Cortico and our work plan. If you're on that committee and interested in being in leadership on that committee, please let me know. If you're not on a committee and interested in serving in any of those ways, please also let me know. Otherwise, I'll sort of stand in place for the time being. I hate to have you leave as we do this,
No.
but I understand. Is there anything?
I'm sorry.
It's all right. Is there anything prior to this discussion, since this was your motion, that you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is not, as I think I stated even in the motion, I'm not trying to back away from work. I'm trying to get more people to the meetings. I think less frequency is a benefit. More frequency makes it easier to go, gosh, I have soccer tonight. I'm not going to show up at all, which driving an hour to, go from Garner all the way up here, making this big loop. I mean, it's about an hour drive, but this meeting was important. So I came. I hate I have to leave early, but I'm not trying to back away from the work. I'm trying to make it easier for folks to prioritize this with so many things that so many of the people in this room do. None of us are one-dimensional in how we interact with the city and what we do. All of us are on other boards, working with other things, CACs, the whole gambit of things. Less meetings would be valuable to us in the long run. And if you want to make a motion and vote real quick, I'll vote for it.
I know where your vote stands. I'll say this.
Do we have enough people?
We do have enough people. We have to also have the discussion on it though.
No. Okay.
But I'll keep.
Fair.
Or he can vote if you want to say.
Yeah. We'll deputize him real quick.
Obviously keep you posted.
Proxy vote.
So yeah, I'm gonna skip over the outreach update so we can get to this. So all of you should have received, what was a motion from our previous meeting. And I'll read it out. I'll read the context of it and then I'll read the motion. It's already been seconded, and it will be open for discussion after that point. So, and this was made by Anthony, and it says, I move to amend the Community Engagement Board bylaws to reduce the required number of full board meetings from monthly to at least 6 per year, held as determined by the chair and co-chair. Additionally, subcommittee meetings shall be held as needed to complete the work plan and fulfill the objectives of the board. This is a move to increase member engagement and not to decrease the work or commitment of board members, as he just stated. So the motion as written is the Community Engagement Board shall hold at least 6 regular meetings per year, dates determined by leadership. Subcommittees shall meet as needed to accomplish the work plan objectives. So motion by Anthony was seconded by Trey. Floor is open for any discussion. Oh, sorry, before you discuss, I just want to point out, this will require to move anywhere 2/3 of, in favor of the motion from the people present right now. And will also require it to be approved by city council. So even if we vote and say, yeah, we want to do it, it's not effective until it's approved by council.
And the, I guess urgency is because there's a hope to get this on council's next, meeting? Is that why we did it on, like, through email instead of waiting?
Well, everybody has to be notified at least 7 days before the meeting anyway. And then if it is something that we vote on, we're going before council next month anyway.
Yeah.
So I wanted to put it all on one agenda. It can be done anytime, but I just want to, since we
Yeah.
already have the time,
No, that makes sense.
let's do it together.
I'm in favor. I have a question. Yeah, and I think our discussion last time was that we did, the 6 times a year was good as long as we know that, the president, the officer could call for extra meetings if we needed. So I think knowing that is still that flexibility is there. And I think the other thing we need to consider is how that we fully utilize that. I'm involved in a lot of stuff, so I mean, I have meetings and Zooms all the time, but is to use that time effectively to review all this stuff so that when we come to the meeting, that we're prepared. So that would help, because if you're not, then you can't get the full input of the committee to make the decisions we need to make. So, you know, by having it every other month or something, you've got time to look at this stuff, hopefully, and make some notes and come back so we can move it forward. You know, because sometimes with everything else going on, you can use that. So, I mean, to me, I don't really see a problem as long as it, you know, that we say, what is the reason to get more people at the meeting? Is it because we meet every month? Is it because of the locations that we're having for the meetings? Or what? See, so we're just kind of changing it, but is there a root problem that we have not addressed? So we changed it and the root problem has not been addressed, and I'm concerned.
Well, I just want to offer that the reason we're moving around is because there was a desire to learn about the community and open up opportunities for the community to come to these meetings, right? So like, just being clear in terms of where we are and what. Yeah.
I think we do need to explain some of these things that we take for granted to the new members, to give them some history so that they can understand.
I'm gonna do something a little out of order from what we've normally done and just go around the horn. So for discussion, if you don't have anything to say, that's fine, but start here, and if you have something to discuss, we'll just go around so everybody gets their own time to speak without interruption. So I'll skip back to you.
All right.
We already heard Dr. Lane, then we'll skip to Ramona. Ramona?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Also, can you,
Oh, I'm sorry.
you too.
Oh. I thought it was on both sides.
Yeah, I thought you were both sides too.
Took your card.
Yep.
It's not on both.
I thought it was both.
I guess that's what happened when you get here early, I guess. Like, I guess with me being the new person, I mean, I think the six meetings works because I coach kids, but in real life, I mean, I'm coming from Durham, so for me, it's a little bit challenging. I mean, like, traffic is picked up, so, I mean, so I think it kind of gives us the flexibility, but as far as, I mean, we're in a virtual society now. I mean, can some of these meetings be held virtually? So, no, so that's a definite no.
That's correct. For the full board meetings, we
Okay.
can. For the subcommittee meetings, we can.
But yeah, then I'm fine for the 6, because it gives me the flexibility. Like, I mean, I have a schedule that, I mean, like a huge book just for my personal stuff. So it's kind of, and then work and, so it's kind of, it just makes it a little bit easier. Gives you another option.
Veronica.
As a new member, fairly new, I think 5 or 6 months I've been here. I'm not under the impression that reducing our frequency would cause people to come more. I go to a lot of extracurricular things. I went to the, Engage Raleigh Expo. I'm working on the, work plan committee, like people aren't showing up. And it's not because of the frequency. It's because if you can't commit 2 hours a month, you need to roll off the board. You don't need to vote against meeting once a month, 2 hours a month. for a volunteer role that gives you a little bit of clout, you can pat yourself on the back. Board, just resign. Like, it's not that hard to show up. Second Wednesday, every month, 4:30 to 6:30. It is not that hard. So I'm gonna vote against it, if that's not obvious.
Baby Yoda. I mean, Carmen.
I don't. I feel some of what Veronica said. I also feel like, I guess having been on this board since its inception, I do remember sleeping really good. And last month, I was driving my daughter to Disneyland for her birthday, or Disney World for her birthday. But it's just on my calendar. I don't have a problem with a monthly meeting. I think we have work to do, and I don't see cutting our time, helping us get the work we have to do done. I could maybe, maybe if you are, maybe if we took that opposite month meeting to be committee meetings as opposed to a separate committee meeting. So, that's 2 meetings a month, maybe do that. But I'm kind of Veronica. I mean, I'm committed to doing this unless it happens. So I know, whatever the will of the board is, but I know that the time, the length and the time of our meetings, for some people have been issues since it started.
Me personally, I guess for me, I'll probably vote yes to, do it 5 or 6 times, a year. And I'd say personally, this is because I don't know if you know, I just graduated, so I'm new to the work world. So right now, I'm interviewing and for instance, today, I had an interview, right before this meeting, and I just feel sometimes with life, if it were to be moved every other, it would give the flexibility for not only me, but other people who have other life stuff. It gives us the flexibility to rearrange our schedules and that way prioritize the meetings, the lower frequency of meetings, if we have them lower. And I'm not saying just do nothing for that month. I definitely agree, we could have stuff, I keep going with our subcommittees, but me personally, I'm in favor. Just because of being able to prioritize other stuff. And just I feel kind of if moving to that direction, it would kind of help to, Dr. Lane said, it would give us the opportunity to dig deeper, and have having a longer time to look at stuff and then come back and make more of an impact, I feel
I have a lot of thoughts on it. This really kind of ties into things that I've been thinking about. And I was hopeful, that we, I don't know, would maybe become a part of our work plan. I have a lot of messy thoughts, so I just scribbled them down here. So this, our lack of attendance is not isolated to us. It's across all of the boards and commissions. And I wonder why. I was curious, if this would be the work of our committee to, create a survey that sends out, or I think I've thought about it as twofold, as a survey to find out from members' experiences. Is it when you had something in mind before becoming a board member, was your experience, is that did it align? What was your onboarding process like? What are the barriers to you participating? So really finding that out, and we might find out that the attendance is because other people have commitments and whatnot. Can we do, an alternative would be, can we do a hybrid as opposed to reducing the minutes? So that's one option, but then, so I think it is obviously not isolated to us. I mean, I get alerts all the time that this committee's canceled, planning commission is good. And this is significant work to help inform the council. So those are just some thoughts. I also think that reducing the frequency of meetings loses the opportunity further for community participation, which we saw there was some really great input that was obtained from an in-person opportunity, especially since the other committees are going on, just meeting remotely. Not that that's a bad thing. I think it also gives people access to it. If you have other commitments, you don't need to trek across town for an hour. If you have the opportunity to actively participate, not just through owl watching. So community members and board members. I also, I like the idea of perhaps bi-monthly with the board meeting, 1 month committees meeting another, but that both would have an option in person across Raleigh. I like that structure for people to engage, because I don't know if that's really happening with other committees. They have one place. So I think it's a really unique approach. Just Boston.
Sure. We talked about it in our equity, subcommittee. I initially felt like Monica was very strong about, needing to meet in person, each month instead of the 6 month. And a little bit to what you said, I mentioned that in our subcommittee, that to get to the root of the attendance, and life does happen, right? I've missed a couple meetings, birthday, whatever, life does happen. But what is the real reason people are missing, right? Is it because of scheduling, or is it because of how they feel about their participation on the board? And so one of the things I had mentioned too is when first appointed in December, I was super excited about the work that we were going to do. In my head, I didn't know, right? But just thinking what the city council do and what was proposed to this group, really excited. And in my opinion, I'm not sure I can't wrap my head around where we're going and what we're doing. And so, and I'm just being honest, amongst friends and colleagues. And so because if I can't wrap my head around it, are others feeling the same way? And is that the reason they're not showing up? Because I feel like if you think your work is important, then you're gonna make the time and show up for the 2 hours. Just like the dad is doing soccer, I did for my birthday. We're gonna make the time to show up for what we feel is important. So I feel like maybe before we determine that we cut back on meetings, kind of see or take a survey to see what is the root cause of why people are not attending. Just my opinion. So I don't know yet which way I will.
You don't have to say, I didn't mean to.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Everybody can say their piece.
I don't know that I perceive this to be an existential issue because, I don't, because when we,
I know the word, but
life or death, like,
Thank
will this stop the community engagement board from existing? I don't know. I think it's interesting, because I wasn't here at that meeting, irony of all ironies. I've really only heard secondhand sort of the experience and, I've been trying to hold space for people to share their feedback just so that I can hear it. Because at the end of the day, I don't care. I'm going to do the work that's in front of me and I'm going to do it the best way that I know how. Nobody interrupts or disrupts my integrity except for me. So like in the world of what's necessary for me as a person and an individual to be on this board, I would meet whatever obligations are there. Sometimes a little sloppy, sometimes a little messy, but it still happens. But I also recall earlier on, like, as we were, as the bylaws committee was coming back to us in terms of where they were going, we did have a conversation about how often we needed to meet. And it did span like, well, is it once a month, or do we need to go twice a month? Do we need to do this? And there was something attached, like, in that decision making. And so this is surfacing because I'm hearing where people are coming from. There was something attached to the need at that point in time to establish the bylaws, to get a work plan together. Like, it felt important and necessary for us to meet month to month to track things so that we could push them. That being said, there's something really interesting just in terms of the worlds that I think my concern in disrupting the schedule is that it loses that piece. Like, otherwise, how are we engaging with community? How do we make it meaningful that we're only offering the opportunity once every 8 weeks rather than once every 4 weeks? And yes, the opportunity is underutilized, right? At the end of the day, there are efforts that are being made to do that. And so I just want to make sure that we're acknowledging that within this body, there are individuals and there are collections and affiliations of people that are working to make everything that we do have meaning. I think sometimes what I experience in going to, in sort of like trying to make the decision, like, one of the reasons I brought up that idea about community engagement is because some people are still in here with an agenda. And I don't know if they're literally here or if we're just not acknowledging that people have agendas, right? Like, we all do. I'm an actor. Everything that comes out of my mouth is about to achieve something. That's what I'm trying to do, right? Like, so I'm not a fool in that way of like thinking that when we talk about these things that we're not necessarily bringing our full selves into it. I think the critical question that I have to ask or to pose is like, are we in a space where we recognize that community engagement is about servicing everyone's voice and bringing it up to the top and not enacting outcomes, right? Like, there was a time when I felt like we had a contingent of board members that were trying to actualize an outcome specific to CACs, and we're calling it community engagement. And that's the concern that I have, is I just want to make sure that we're making a decision with shared values and shared interests in mind, because that's the thing that's going to keep me coming back, right? For those of you that are in the recovery community, you recognize those words, right? Keep coming back. That's why I keep doing it, because I know somewhere along the line, what matters to me comes through, whether that is going to be once a month, or if it's whatever. If I'm chair of the equity subcommittee, y'all, we're gonna be meeting, because we got a meeting on the schedule. We done told the public we're gonna be doing it. And the only way it's gonna get canceled is if we don't have quorum. And I'm gonna look at you funny, because I done texted you 4 times. Right? So like, for me, it's a question of what are the accountabilities we're holding? And does this choice actually honor who and how we are in space as individuals and as a collective? And I don't know that an answer in either direction is going to do that. So I just want to make sure that we're right sizing our own thoughts about this choice in recognizing its potential impacts, right? Like, whatever. So just with that in mind, that's what's causing my hesitation, is like, I don't want this to be perceived as a one size fits all solution, because I don't know that exists.
Sure. Okay. For those who were not here, you can also see that I seconded his motion. And I can fully express that in that moment, I was super frustrated, because it took us, 30 minutes before we had quorum. We were literally just about to like cancel the meeting because we didn't have enough people. And so I was like super frustrated about that. And we had a guest come speak with us. And so it made us look like really bad that our own board wasn't there. So like, at least have quorum so that they could, get their stuff out or whatever. But in talking with the subcommittee, the equity subcommittee, and having more time to think about it, Either way, personally, does not matter to me, whether it moves or changes. That part doesn't matter to me, because like Jeff, like, if it's on my schedule, I made a commitment to go to it, so that's what I'm gonna do. And I've moved other things because, oh, I have something standing on the second Wednesday of the month. I've come here on my birthday. Like, I've come to meetings on my birthday or the day before or the day afterwards. But like, when I commit to something, that's what's gonna happen. Like, the days that I haven't come is because like I cannot get out of bed or whatever the case may be. And so like, I also agree, like, it's a commitment level. Like, you said you're gonna do something, be somewhere, like, you should do it. And I don't know if it's something that we should look at as far as like bylaws and how to hold our other board members accountable for when they're not here. Because yes, we all have life, things that come up, but I don't think every life thing that comes up is a valid excuse to not be here with the commitment that you made to, we've made to each other being on this board and, to what we're doing. So that's all I'm saying. Yeah.
And y'all, even though you don't vote.
I mean, it's their time. They prepare for this. They have to set these meetings. They have to be here. They do this for all the subcommittees, so.
And do you all have feedback on what Suzanne raised in relationship to like the broader rounds of participation and all
We
of that?
hold that to, like, before the vote, or?
Yeah, there's
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
well,
My staff update.
Go ahead.
I don't know that it matters where it falls, but it's the survey idea, like if OC is already doing something in that arena, I don't want for us to spend too much time and energy trying to make something happen. So that's my only concern in raising that question.
Well, we are, I'm sure you all know that Ellen is, basically leading kind of like the convening of all boards and commissions, working with liaisons. They have bi-monthly meetings and, we're all trying to get on the same page. So all boards and commission meetings are held the same manner. That is currently not the case, right? There is a manual. That manual needs to get updated. She's working on updating that manual as well as creating training content for onboarding and kind of creating a system where it's more automatic, right? Like, we can see who's taking that training or who's done the onboarding. So right now it's a very manual process. So we're looking at possibly, our success factors platform, using that and creating something where it's externally facing as well, where we can have trainings and content for board members to kind of get on the same page, have that foundational knowledge so that, they're prepared and ready to serve as an actual member of a board or commission, and be successful. So that is in the works. Like I said, that's another thing that should have been created yesterday, but, we're a small but mighty team that's soon to grow. Yeah. But I love the idea. I think it's definitely, and if you guys want to add that on as a thing, we could always use the help.
I would also say, I wanted to agree with Suzanne. This is not isolated to this board. I talked to Bynum Walter today, who is the Assistant Director of Planning for the city. And the Planning Commission has had to cancel 2 meetings because of quorum. They had to cancel today, so I don't know what reducing meetings, keeping the same. I don't know what fixes the actual problem to get people to show up. I do also want to say that I think that people who are nominated to whatever board in the city, I think that the people who are nominating them are not explaining the level of commitment to them that it takes to be on these boards and commissions. I'll just leave that there.
I do want to add on just a little bit here because I've looked at like our mission, our bylaws, but I've also looked at the City of Raleigh charter ordinances of why they created us in the first place. And one of the, responsibilities is we have here that, we are to elevate the voices of people who are marginalized and participating in government. And I think some of that you might have, so for the people who are on these boards, they're on a lot of other boards. If you could tap people who aren't on boards, they have a lot of information about what impacts them directly, so they can come to planning meetings, they can come to arts, environmental advisory boards, our board, but they might need more support, and that speaks to the onboarding, is like, they've never served on a board, maybe they don't know what Robert's Rules of Order are, how do you, show up in these meetings, what are minutes? People have never even heard of the word minutes. We use acronyms in our minutes that aren't explained. So making it accessible just on a baseline, you might actually find that tapping into people who aren't overcommitted, haven't had those opportunities before, but they have the knowledge, and they might not come across so polished and professional, but they have a lot to contribute. I think that is an untapped source of people who would show up if given the opportunity and the support and training.
Can I offer that one of the metrics for this board is having, like, we've had people that have not been on board. I've never been on a board before.
That's my question.
Yeah, so I think it's in there, in that realm. For me personally, it feels like because we're community engagement, that's what literally feels like the overextension. In the fact that we're out representing community, we're out actively participating in our community. It's what people have recognized that have brought us into the room. So in the world of having this decision balanced against that makes more sense than the idea of, well, people should have flexibility. To me, it carries a little bit more weight in understanding that I'm needing this to balance out the work that got me here in the first place. That being said, that's not what I feel like I heard, that's not what I recall that I'm hearing. And I think as a person who's been here since the first year, one of the things that I think exists as a seminal challenge that is very difficult to sort of crack open is we don't have a clearly defined sort of work process, right? The planning board, the architectural, what was the other one? The architectural district, whatever that one is.
District commission.
I found that's cute, the HDC or whatever it is. But there are other boards that have very clear processes because they're implicated different ways. And I think where we might be experiencing the crunchiness is that we are finally getting an office that's moving into being a department that we can then work to advise more effectively, because there are just things that we can't throw at the 6 people that are working real hard to support the city of Raleigh, which has like 300,000 people in that race somewhere around here. 5. Oh, Lord.
And we didn't always have 6 people.
Yeah. And so I think for me, that's one of the major issues is like we don't have an immediate structured hand to hold in the process. And so that can create, at least in the conversations I've had with some of the newer members, it can create frustration along with confusion, and that can lead to disengagement. So on one level, is there a word, and we've sort of not touched it, but do we think we might need to effectively take a look at onboarding as an engagement issue?
I'm not gonna touch any of that within the scope of this motion personally. I think it's something we definitely add, like I've made like list of a lot of those comments and some of the suggestions within the scope of what we're talking about right now. I think it is parallel. I don't think it's on top of it, and we have all of 16 minutes left tonight. One, thank you for speaking on, yes.
Can I just throw in there, because somebody mentioned looking at our bylaws, we have ways to remove people if they're not taking or handling their commitment, and maybe, I don't know,
I think it's
maybe
kind of
it's time to look at, use something. You can be more aggressive.
kind of loose.
So let me get there. One, again, thank you for sharing those things honestly and openly. I don't think we serve ourselves or this board or the people that we represent by speaking about what we think sounds good, when all it does is hurt the work that we do. So I always encourage, whether you agree or not, to speak honestly. You don't have to cuss people like Carmen does, but however you need to do it, say it. Or maybe we do, I don't know. And I'm gonna take a few minutes to do that myself, because this has been something that is frustrating to me, but it's also, I'm a very protective person. So I'm protective of not just myself, but of you and your time and your opinions and what people have to say about you. It's disrespectful for people to continuously not show up to these meetings and ask you to be here and make decisions for the board that they sit on and for the people that they represent. It's disrespectful to waste their time, the staff's time, to do the same thing. It's disrespectful to ask us to plan ahead of these meetings for you to not come and then sit in these meetings and not care about what's done, to not read minutes, to not follow up, to not go to your subcommittee meetings. All of that irks me on a level that's different from like, you're just not showing up. It's a level of disrespect to each of you when that happens. So not having quorum is an amplification of that has just sort of eaten away at me. Nobody here is playing the busy Olympics. Some people have family to take care of. I have 3 jobs. Some people have their own health issues. Some people are mentally struggling to make it out of bed every day. You being busy, and I'm speaking to a very universal you, I'm sorry if I'm pointing at Dr. Lane, you're right there. You being busy is not an excuse in my book. If you make the commitment, you show up. If you can't show up for extenuating circumstances, we're all human as well. So those things are forgiven and understood. But we're not here to say, I'm too busy, my life is too busy to continuously not show up. The intermittent and you can't be there, again, I get it, but to continuously commit, say that you're committed to this, to being here, and I mean this for subcommittee meetings as well, and then to put 0 effort and let everybody else carry the weight of your commitment is not fair and not right, in my opinion. I think we're down to the core of this group. Again, there's several of us who have been here since the very beginning. And if you think about what that first group looked like, if you can remember, I think we've really gotten down to the core of people who, if they had an agenda, were able to subside it for the work, for the good of the order, like for the work of everyone else. And there were people who were very clearly here to derail the work that we were creating for work that they wanted done. So even with what remains, I feel like we're down to people who are able to say, oh, this didn't feel good in the beginning, I wasn't sure about it, but I'm committed to it. And I appreciate having that carryover, because I think that commitment, and I'm looking Dr. Lane, Carmen, Trey, Jeff, that commitment I think has inspired other people to be committed to the board as well. And I think that's important. And we've had a lot of turnover. We still don't have a full board. We have 14 people. We are meant to be 16. And that is from people not feeling like work was getting done. It's from people not showing up to meetings and us being like, what are you doing and why are you not here? That's from people having their agenda not being met here and wanting to go somewhere else. All of those things have sort of shifted us to 14. I think we're at a stable point with 14. But all of that to say, we've been in consistent transition points. I will say this honestly too, we started with a really excellent chair who had never served on a board before. So to create the structure that Jeff is talking about without the board having existed before, having the office only having existed for a year before the board was created, and then having someone who had no concept of how this was supposed to be or how this was going to be structured, all makes for exactly what you're talking about. It felt good to meet every month, and it felt necessary because that was what we knew to do. And then when that went away, which was the end of that previous chair's 1 year, we were left with nothing else to do. I don't know if y'all realize, there wasn't like anything on the table. There was no transition point. There was no passing of baton. There was no information carried over. There was nothing there. So in between trying to continue the function and then trying to figure out where we were going to go with that, we ended up in this place, which I think has been a continuous transition, sort of roll down the hill into a meeting, into a place that we think is meaningful. And now it's another point of, we have work to do. And I think that's also an important place to be with people who want to do that work, which again, I think is what we have in this room with one addition that had to leave. I think that's where that sits. I don't know that cutting the meeting times, from my perspective, I'll say, is the right answer. I do think that there's something underlying that we aren't addressing, and I think that thing is your commitment to being on this board and what community engagement means to you as part of this board. I think that there's something to be said for looking at the attendance, just for requirement, expectation, whatever it is, because right now, you know, if you have 3 unexcused absences, then you're off the board, but then what's unexcused, and then we have no parameters for when unexcused happens or when inexcused, like, all of that is sort of nebulous. I think this is the atom bomb to blow it up. I think we can take a step, in my opinion, to take a step back and look at that first. And then to their point and your point about when people are appointed or put onto this board, up front and center. If you miss more than 4 meetings, please don't come back because we won't have you, because you aren't part of this work. Like, that's up front and center about what's being done here, because there is serious business about what we're doing. And that's not the case now. Now it's like, oh, if you can't come, just let me know. Someone let me know today at 2:00 they weren't showing up. If that had been the linchpin in our quorum, where everybody rearranges their day at the drop of a hat because one person didn't follow or didn't consider what that means. So I say all that to say, I think that we're in a good place. I think we're in an important place. I think there's important work to be done. I think the people in this room can and want to do that work. I'm protective over us and our time for anybody else that comes after this, because I want them to make sure they understand that this work is important. I don't think turning back how often we meet does that. I do think that it's important for us to be out and to be visible and to be seen. If we didn't meet every other month, that woman at Carolina Pines might not have been able to voice her concern to anybody, because nobody would have been there, you know, potentially, if she didn't know we were there. So I see that there is a specific community-facing in-person presence that needs to be met. We are running around the city to say that we are being out for people to see us. How much of a contradiction is that if we're doing that even less, in my mind? I'm gonna get off the soapbox, but that's where I personally stand. That's where I stand as someone who has, again, been with the board from the beginning, who's been in some form of leadership since the beginning, and has seen what other people have to do to get us even the little bits that we've gotten so far, this far. That doesn't leave us a lot of time. But I also want to say that this is not a terminal vote in terms of, like, just because it's a motion one time, it cannot be brought up again. If y'all don't show up next month, guess who's making a motion to cut the meeting? Because I won't do it again. So if you feel like you're, you know, we'll go with what the vote is, but if you feel like, and if we see that this continues to be a problem, not rooted in anything else, then we can always come back to this. So I just want you to keep that in mind. It's not a end all be all, never speak of it again. So that's it. The motion on the floor, I'll read it again. The Community Engagement Board shall hold at least 6 regular meetings per year, dates determined by leadership. Subcommittees shall meet as needed to accomplish the work plan. Then that fourth has been seconded. We've had discussion. We'll move to a vote. I'm going to ask that everyone raise a hand so that we can get a clear count. One, because we have to make sure we have 2/3 for it to pass, and also just for the record. All of those in favor of this motion? Ma'am?
What's 2/3? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So it's 2/3 of the board,
Yeah.
which would be 14 total on the
So
board.
it's 2/3 of the board, not 2/3 of people in attendance.
As far as I know from the.
I just want to make sure, because I was confused.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Somebody do quick math?
It's not
We passed it, it's 9.38.
Okay. I thought we had 18. Not that we had, but that we're supposed to.
16 is the full
16.
board, and we're at 14, yeah.
Okay.
So does it round up to 10 or round down to 9?
So you have that.
Because if you go by code, you have to
Yeah,
round.
But you have to have the 14 positions active. Right. 2 positions and nobody's in it, you can't count that.
So it's 2/3 of 14,
Right.
yeah, which is 9 point.
9.38, which technically means 10.
10, that's what I'm saying, do we round up, do we round down?
We are gonna round around to everybody's vote. So anybody, all those opposed, please raise a hand. I'm sorry, all those in favor, please raise a hand. Oh, come on, y'all. Come on. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Look, this is not about, it's not a vote of shame or.
I mean, like, I could always change, you know what I'm saying? Like hearing what you said and hearing what everybody else said, it makes sense.
You vote exactly how you feel.
Yeah.
Not that, everybody else wants to close your eyes, I don't care, but there's no pressure or shame or anything in this vote. So Ashley Ramon, in favor. All those opposed, please keep in mind that abstentions are not a vote in, like, a void vote. So all those opposed? Oh, I'm writing his name down, I know you all. I'm gonna add myself.
Complicated math, man.
Okay, thank you. So,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm just causing trouble.
7, I got 72.
5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
7 opposed, 2 for.
8, 9, 2, 4, 6.
It's 2 of us.
and I'm with you. That was me, it was me.
Yes.
I was the 8, okay. So, I'm like, why is this? That's a vote of 2 to 7 in opposition. It does fail, will not move forward. This will, of course, all be recorded in the minutes. Again, thank you for the discussion on all of this, because I think it's very important. We have 3 minutes left. And when I tell you that we have important business to take care of, I mean it. So I will offer up any time now for an extension of this meeting for any period of time that you may decide to go over at least our work plan, which goes in front of council next month. Carmen, something to say?
I move that we spend our meeting time for 15 minutes.
15 minutes. So, motions on the floor.
A second.
Second, and all those in favor can audibly say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Cool. 15 minutes, that's 45. 45. Okay, with that, I'm gonna go through the work plan. So we saw this last month. Dr. Lane, thank you for your feedback on the structure of this, because I think it led us to a better place when we go into the second step, which we'll talk about. So I'm gonna go over quickly the structure of it. I won't read word for word, but please keep up. If you have questions, let's ask them now, because again, this is going to be going before city council next month to be approved for the next year. So we rearranged some things here so that it does clearly state what our goals are, our strategies for those goals, and what actions we are going to take, versus just having the goals and all the actions and all the things in different sections, without kind of relating to each other. So there was some rearranging. The first goal, and also Veronica and Jeff, feel free to jump in, because I'll say something that I remember right. Acquiring internet knowledge and then continuing to explore methods to increase the participation. I think those were strategies, or one of those was a strategy before, but now it's like the overarching, here's what we plan to do. We want to acquire and somehow compile all of this knowledge that we get from people who trust us and want to have those conversations. And then we're going to use all of this time to find other ways to really increase participation, get people engaged, be out, raise awareness, all of that. It's almost a more general scope for us to work in. That makes sense so far? It was one of the strategies. We just moved it up to an overarching goal instead of like a pinpoint of what we're going to do. The strategies, listening to inform community engagement practices, and then identifying opportunities to impact and strengthen community building. So listening to inform, part of that is the use of portico. So if the strategies are very general, again, whatever we can use in those scopes to listen, so that we can inform our practices and to identify opportunities to impact and strengthen community building, those can again be very broad. So that doesn't mean we step back from saying we're only using portico, and that's the only thing that's gonna help us get these two goals done. It's broader, it does incorporate portico, but it doesn't limit us to just one thing or whatever one thing we say in this plan. And then the tactics or the action. So this is how we've got these goals of what we want to do. We know how we want to do them. Here are the actual actions we're going to take in order to do them. And I don't think any of these changed. I think all of this existed and it just moved. So engaging community conversations, we already know portico, participating in existing events around city and with boards. We kept developing a standardized engagement framework to increase board and community access to participation, and then developing or providing rapid response to the city or to city council on urgent issues. Any questions on that or any additional input? Yeah.
And it's probably stupid, but why did we sacrifice rapid response and urgent? And why did we not capitalize citizen action? I'm just curious.
English is hard.
That's why you're here.
Any other questions or changes? And do like check for typos, whatever, because I am wrong with them most of the time.
I have a question this maybe down.
Yep.
If I help do this.
Sure.
First bullet point for creating recommendations to the city council. Do we have like a formal process for making recommendations to city council?
Kind of. So part of what happens, what is supposed to happen in this process over the year after the work plan is approved, is working toward whatever we say we're going to do. And then from that are supposed to be feedback based on what we hear from community, citizens, whatever the case may be, what those problems or issues are, and then making recommendations to city council in what is now this year's report, which is gonna happen in November, saying this is what we've done, this is what we compiled, this is what we've heard, based on that X, Y, Z, we would encourage you to do on behalf of your citizens and your community's needs. Now, what happens with that, not our bag to say one or the other, but that's supposed to be the process.
And then as Councilmember Jones alluded, we can also sort of sidestep that by like, making a motion to make a formal statement to X, Y, and Z. So we can also potentially get on city council agenda for things. We just haven't had anything that has moved to the level of like, to do that, but we do have the ability to get on the agenda through our liaison.
We should have done that for Rico.
Well, and that, yeah, I mean.
Well, I'm a little curious, like, why did nobody come to our meeting to talk to us about that? Like, over the last couple of months, nobody's come to talk about that.
Well,
Nobody's
to be
been
fair,
directed to
I will
us.
say that Carmen has, I remember as it was happening, hearing from Carmen about that.
No, right, but I mean, like, from public comment, nobody's come to engage, like, this would be a great opportunity to come and say, oh, public comment was full at the city council meeting, I'm gonna go to the community engagement board and talk to them.
I wonder, I'm about to say,
Right.
literally about to say.
Well, and I think that some of the history that we have with public comment specific to CACs
Yeah.
has created perhaps an idea that we don't really do very much of anything in that arena as well.
And I guess, I'm just thinking like, the city councilors were out, campaigning, they were out like engaging the community. And I'm sure a lot of people commented and said like, I'm not being allowed to speak to council, or I'm not getting enough time at council. Nobody thought to say, go talk to the community engagement board. Like,
Anymore. I think a little bit, we may need to think about doing some branding,
right,
really did. We just at that point. So as we go into this next year, I think that's Cause I have the same problem, with CAC. All the people doing things in the community, I always run across people, with, no, I don't know about this. What is the CAC? And you think that it's all over. It's communication, so we may need to think about some branding so that we can control the narrative a little bit instead of wondering why. You know, so we've done everything we can to say, hey, we have that great mission. We have these great things that we can do. Now, how can we help you do it? Or we more proactive to take an issue like that and say, hey, we need to analyze why that system didn't work. And not wait to ask, well, who's gonna look at that to fix it? Well,
I was just gonna say, I love the idea of controlling the narrative, because I think we were created under a different narrative that we didn't agree to, or we didn't know about in some sense, and have been operating in that. So creating and controlling what is and what isn't in this space where we can do whatever we want to, because there are no real regulations at this point, is a great point.
I was just gonna say, like, though controlling the narrative may not have been the objective.
maybe it's wrong term.
No, it's fine. I like it. But we are simultaneously like the social media and things like that. So we do have, I would say, it, you know, we've been here since the beginning. So, you know, it's taken
I know.
some time to get to where we are. Like, we just, a couple meetings ago approved, like, who was gonna be able to put stuff out on social media and like when that was gonna start and what platforms we were gonna have. And so like it is a process, but like we are starting to get those things to be able to put more information about us out there. And there's probably gonna come a time where we need to tweak it or look at something different or add something on. But I just don't want the new people to think that like things aren't moving. Doing.
Can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
I mean, being that I'm new or whatever, I mean, I guess.
You're not the only one.
I mean, we just have to be patient, right? Because like.
I don't like that word.
Well, I mean, you can word it however you want to word it, I guess, but I mean, at the end of the day, right? But my whole thing was like, here's the confusion for me. And I know that you don't have a lot of time, but everything seems to be on this side of town. Like, you know, the south side or whatever. I live on the north side. I mean, there's issues on the north side. When do those issues start to get addressed? You know what I mean? That's what I'm unclear about.
By us or by council?
I mean, I guess on both sides. I mean, because like me just jumping in, it seems like everything is geared towards the south. So if I don't seem overly ambitious, you know, like that's not my area really. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's twofold. One, we are in those neighborhoods because when we come to District E and to A, like we make sure that we have our meetings in those districts. I put a lot of hours into picking the community centers that we go to for that exact purpose of going into historically unrepresented neighborhoods and areas. And then two, if we come to these areas and we have these meetings and it's put out there that we're gonna be there, no one comes to give us the issues. And like, I also kind of live on the north. I'm pretty sure I don't know about all the issues that go on in the north. I don't have no issues right now. And so like, you don't know, like, those people are willing to like come and tell you. And so that's why I said it's twofold. Like, we have to put ourselves out there to let them know, like, hey, this is the thing you can, you know, like, come talk to us about. But at the same time, like, we need them to come and like actually tell us the thing. And so I don't want to place blame on anyone and just say that like, we're trying, but we can only do so much. And we are trying to actively make the effort. And one of those ways is by going to different districts every single time we meet, which goes back to her, like, how are we doing that if we drop meetings back down? But full circle moment.
I mean, I get it. It makes perfect sense. I mean, like, as far as like the way you wrapped it up in a bow or whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure because people know that I'm on this board and people have spoken to me for years, like about issues and stuff like that. I just want to make sure if we're dealing with these issues now, we're going to circle back and we're going to deal with the issues in other districts as well. So I mean, that's the only clarity that I needed. And I mean, I'm on board with everything else. I just wanted to, you know.
I love you all. We have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring us back to the work plan and I was kind of having some reactions or thoughts around it. Some things that I think might be missing. And I do think that there's, I mean, we keep coming back to this of our purpose, our relationship to the council. We are, we aren't to do anything outside of what the council informs us to do and what is in our work plan. And so I'm like,
That's not true.
that's good that we have, what?
That's not true.
I don't think that's.
I'm sorry, I'm only standing because my leg fell asleep, so I'm not like straight.
That's okay. I had read that on when we were originally created, that was the purpose. And I know that there's actually some typos in there that need to be fixed because it references us that we're supposed to make comments on environmental issues to the council. So I think that's a fundamental, needs to be corrected. I've made that comment a couple of times, but, so the process of like our purpose, our process, our means of communication, how we give instructions, how we wrap back around, that's all so messy. I do think that there's still room for us to continue to put some hard structure around council, CACs and us. That's still kind of swirling around. I mean, I've been wanting to kind of revisit this Larry Elephant. I know it was like, we're done with this, but I've got a lot of questions around that. Anyways, there's also some things that the city is doing that we haven't been brought to for discussion. One is that the community feedback survey, the last one was conducted and completed, and we've gotten a huge report, was in 2022 and 2024. We had another one. They're going to be releasing some information that might help guide us. So I think, can we hold off on doing a work plan until we get some of those results? I also think that because we have the 2050 comprehensive plan is in works, and there, I look back at what the process was for creating the 2030 plan, and there's a bunch of stuff that they did all around community engagement. And so maybe we could look at what they did then to help inform what they are now, based on what the needs are identified from the community feedback survey from this year. So I think there's some moving parts that could help inform us, that can give us a bit more structure. And then I also just wanted to say that regards to public participation, as we're going through these meetings, I think you did a great job in trying to figure out where pockets, a lot of intentional thought went into picking our locations. Thank you. But that, and transportation, I know, was one of them, but also childcare. It's dinner time, and for people who have kids, they might take the bus here, but they're gonna bring their kids. And if there's nobody here to watch their kids, to provide childcare while they are participating in a meeting, that is one barrier for people too. I'm just gonna put that out there. And food, if it's at dinner time. So can I bring my child with me to participate in these meetings, and more than just 3-minute public conversation? Is there a dialogue, kind of thing? So those are things that I thought made work plan that might be focused forward. And I know I took.
So we're out of time.
60 seconds. You got
I will say this as an overarching statement as we go back to what this looks like. My view, y'all weigh in, Veronica, Jen. This is framework for us to create what we want to do. So the specifics of those things do not have to be in this framework. That's the work that we do in committee. We create the world we want to live in committee. We bring it to the board to approve, to discuss, to deny, and then we take action from there. We cannot do that unless we can say coherently, this is why we exist, this is the work we plan to do, and why we plan to do it. And that can be as broad as strokes as we need them. So I think valid feedback, but we have to get through this point first. And if you disagree with the goals or the strategies or the tactics to do that, that's a different discussion. That's actually this discussion. If there are other things that can enhance all of that, that is a different discussion. But this part is the important part. And it's the important part in creating what I think is a needed credibility and respectability of this board from council to say, we do work, we do important work, this is the work we plan to do, you should be doing some of this work too, but also to the community to say, we are not mouthpieces for this council, we are mouthpieces for you, so this is how we plan to do that for you in the next year. We have hit 6:45. So, I will, we have a lot that we needed to touch today, a lot. I will ask that if you have any feedback on the structure of this work plan, and we're just gonna talk about the first page because the second and third require explanation because that's all part of Portico. Sorry. Email it. We cannot discuss things. We can't make decisions over email. You can give feedback. So I will send it out again and ask you to send feedback ahead of the meeting so that we can discuss all of those things. The rest of it, I don't know.
And what I will offer is to me, this work plan is intentionally broad so that we can honor the diversity of perspectives that are in the room. Would love to work with the 2050 plan, would love to explore those interdependencies. I didn't want to chain us there because like in terms of the community, the community survey, there's going to be lots of questions about the methodology. We're going to be working to poke holes into that to even get to a space of vetting that source to come into the conversation. So it feels like it's embedded in the continuing to explore methods with an intentionality that those things are broad enough so they can honor, right? So in relationship to getting up to the north side, one of the reasons why we end up in the north side is because in a lot of different ways, they're not struggling in the same ways that some of these other communities are. Because
We'll have to extend the meeting. If we're gonna continue conversation, we gotta extend the meeting, or we're gonna adjourn and have this as something post.
Can I ask a question before I finish? Do we have to vote on this tonight to get it in the?
I think we have one meeting before the council meeting, which will be the week before. So whatever, if there are any changes after that meeting, that's gonna call the work plan subcommittee to meet within 7 days to get them done and back to staff to be put in a presentation for council.
I'm getting married that month. So I'm getting married that month. So.
Meeting 47, we either need a motion to adjourn or to extend.
I would like to continue, but
You can make whatever motion you want. I don't want to pressure you.
to go to 7 o'clock and then we gotta adjourn. So we gotta go part.
That requires a second.
A second.
Trey, all those in favor, please raise your hand because I can't.
I took a bus here, so I just want to make sure that I can take a bus home, which is to the north side. So if I leave, that's why.
We gotta get the vote first. If you're in favor, just raise a hand. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor. Opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4. 7 o'clock. We have 13 minutes. I'm gonna go through this. If you have questions, say them. Unless they're really important. I will ask again any structural questions for what goes on this first page. What we want to do, why we want to do it, how we want to accomplish it. Very general. Is that right? Did I count right? Okay. The second page moves into court vote. I'll say some of this since you are otherwise. Okay. So I'm gonna steal more of Nadia's thunder tonight, and unless if you have something else new, let me know. But this Portico process has been a long one. At this point, we have submitted everything we need to submit. We are at a point of approval. We need something back from them, from Portico,
Yeah, they need to sign the contract from DocuSign,
which is the last step,
other than paying them.
which will, so we are
There's
literally
money in the budget.
one step away from having this signed, sealed, delivered. It is ours, which I think deserves a small round of applause because it's been a great feat. Also have to take time to say thank you to Nadia because she has literally pushed this through almost on her own. We took some initiative and said, hey, this would be cool. And she was like, great, we'll do it. And has carried it step by step, hand in hand from every aspect, ours, from staff, from her office, from Portico side and from the city side to make sure it happens. So we are in her debt for that. That being said, knowing that it's gonna be something that we use definitively this year, we created what we think is a couple of highlights of what this next step in the process looks like with Cortico. So we do have to give them some framework of what we want to do, how we want to do it, who we want to talk to, what we want to accomplish. So this is a very loose attempt to put those things on paper. Okay. First thing is the outreach. So literally, how do we invite Raleigh citizens to be part of the conversation in the process? So community conversations are gonna happen with 6 to 8 people. We have to have locations, we have to figure out, all of those concepts. How do we get people to be interested and say they're willing to sit with us to have these conversations, right? We have to do that somehow. So we outlined some things that we can utilize just to get the word out about the conversations and invite people to say that they're. So using department listservs, passing out invitations at in-person events, using social media. If we have access to the Engage Raleigh Expo attendee list, sending that out to them. Using the specific opt-in categories from the city's website. So anybody that says, yes, I'm interested in community engagement, let me get those emails, we send it to those interested individuals. Flyers at public locations, and then public input. Using public input, which was the other tool that we thought about using instead of Cortico. Because it can map people who have given responses to surveys in the past, we can utilize that to make sure people in those locations do also get the information about being able to participate in community conversation. I think that's most everything. Jeff, Veronica, anything additional? Okay, does all that make sense so far?
There's such detail in this, in the work plan when you look at it. I don't know if does it have to go in like this? Can it be the outline and then just be an addendum or attachment? Because there's so much. This is the goal when you look at the work plan itself.
It can be. Part of this is, a lot of the significance of this is for Cortico.
Yeah.
So they want to know these things before we start the process. So part of it is for us, but part of it is part of the actual need of the work plan. So to say that we're going to do it is one thing, but to say we're also thinking and planning out what that looks like, I think is an addition that we can have. So whether or not it's presented as like a joint document, I don't think it has to be. It can be an additional conversation when presented. Yep.
I was, because I think it was 2 meetings prior, there was discussion about, maybe 3, but that, to take a look at what other boards and commissions, what their work plans are. And I've done that on a couple. Some of them don't have it listed on their websites, but some of them, I mean, they are far more robust, and a lot of them tie directly with the city strategic plan. So it's like deliverable. But the structure of ours, even the one page or last year's, as well, is more broad, compared to a couple of others that are really comprehensive. So it just, what level of, detail are we going to structure this around?
For sure. How we invite people to the process. Questions on that, additions that are important, I think.
Okay, I don't understand. Is it randomized selection or is it randomized selection?
We're not there yet.
Oh, sorry. I thought that's where we were.
First part, outreach.
Oh, I thought you meant.
Anything we're
We
missing?
said selection, so I was with you there.
Sorry, outreach.
Yeah, but it's still an outreach.
Okay. Selection process, how to finalize the 6 to 8 participants per conversation session. Randomized selection of individuals to allow for control of it. It's probably randomized. That's my edit. So we'll remove that D. So the idea, this is a little bit contrary to what we talked about before. Jeff, feel free to jump in at any point in time. What we talked about initially was to say we'll pick 6 to 8 people from each district after they apply, and those will be people that represent that district. So we're picking specifically for district, right?
Yeah, Justin, the thing about randomizing a population is that you have to have some similarity, something to hold on that provides a baseline. And it couldn't be age, it couldn't be a demographic piece, so it ended up being geographical. I think this came up in the meeting, when we were meeting, like there's problematic in the way that our districts are set up in the sense that we don't, because we're done in that pie situation, you have like that uber concentrated urbanized area that is shared all the way out to the more rural / suburban spaces. But at the end of the day, at least there's some common factor. So that's what that is. I don't know if it needs to change or be different, but there has to be something that all the participants in one room hold in common. And it seemed to be counter to what we were actually trying to achieve, saying that it needed to be along ethnic lines or that it needed to be along renter, the other metrics that we use to assemble ourselves in the first place.
So instead of saying you have to be this age to be part of the conversation, you have to have this experience, it's literally by district. And then we will select those 6 to 8 people by their location, rather than specifically any other demographic information.
And we could then control, that we're limiting, if you're in this zip code, there can only be one of these. We can do things with zip codes to get across the district itself.
Right. So generating a pool of applicants, mitigating factor being where they live. We can collect that demographic information and use it for something later. So we want to know about how old they are or any of those other factors, but that will be how they're selected. It will be useful later, but not how they're selected. That's probably repetition, that they'll be selected at random. That's what it says. The 6th conversation. So there are 5 districts currently. The 6th conversation, because we are doing 6 to 8 person conversations, will be a compilation of just anyone that has applied, not specified by district. So it could be a person from District A, it could be 2 people from District D, it could be, but that also allows us kind of another like control factor against just geography. So you could get anyone from anywhere and they tell us what their perspective is in that group of people. Does that make sense?
I think maybe I'm missing something, and I apologize, this might have gone over my head. But the 6th, I'm understanding about the 6th, the control group.
Mhm.
Does that mean for the other conversations, you're going to randomize them? Like there will always be someone from A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E.
They're all from A,
All from A.
all from B.
Okay,
With us.
that didn't come through in the verbiage here, so.
That's an important note.
But that gets you on the 6th group is just like a 2 A's, a 0 from C, like, okay. Thank you.
That's good enough.
Cool.
Does the process otherwise make sense?
Yes,
We're comfortable with that.
yes.
Okay. Participation and engagement strategies. So this is, aside from people just wanting to do good and speak up and represent the community, also being able to incentivize that participation, because we are asking for time and kind of intimate information from them, but also to show some gratitude for them taking that time and for whatever else they provide. There could be follow-ups, we don't know, but for all of that. I think there are only 3 things listed here. Exploring the possibilities of an honorarium. So a small gift to say, thank you for doing this participation with us. That would be budget contingent, if that's legal. I don't know, sure it is. But whatever those realms look like, offering an honorarium. I mean, sure not to go to jail.
You guys have 4,500 budget left.
We're not giving them all of that. Including refreshments for each session, which are important. And then considering partnering with a sponsor to help offset costs. So I don't know if that's another department, I don't know if that's someone outside the city, whatever it is, but someone somewhere that supports what we're doing and says, we want to offer this in the vein of, yes, ma'am. Oh, limitless.
For those, I just want to throw in this, and it might be helpful for other meetings for us is, and this might tie into the 3rd partnering with, but I think childcare is huge to get people to participate along with food, childcare, transportation. And so maybe transportation, we can get a ticket voucher. So if people do need to take public transportation, we can give them a voucher. So at least their transportation, their food and their childcare needs are met.
And we're like racing the clock.
In 1 minute.
facilitation. We talked about early on hiring a facilitator for these conversations, someone that is outside of this particular group. You can still participate if you would like to as a board member. There are trainings we can go through with Portico. But the general consensus, I don't know if it's ever agreed on, was to hire a facilitator. Carmen told me that's all the time we have.
I don't agree the board members should participate because it might sway the conversation.
They can be, the idea was for them to be able to be trained. So if it's to step in if they need to be part of it, yeah.
Oh, to facilitate, okay, not participate.
Right.
That's a difference.
Okay, we still, again, much to do. We'll discuss how to follow up with this information and at least progress us forward to the next meeting. After we adjourn, we will need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I thought it was implied in Carmen's setting it.
That's the motion. I didn't think.
Oh. At 7:00.
Motion to adjourn.
Hey, Veronica, we need a second.
Second.
All those in favor say, hoorah. All right, y'all have follow directions. Any opposed? Thank y'all so much. Thank you.